Hi, everyone. It's Janice from the Divorcing Religion podcast. I'm excited to tell you that my book is now for sale. It's called Divorcing Religion, a memoir and survival handbook. And I'll make sure you have a link in the notes for that. And also, I want to encourage you to like, subscribe, and become a member of my YouTube channel. Take care. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Divorcing Religion podcast. I'm your host, Janice Selby. I'm a registered professional counselor and a religious trauma recovery coach. My guest today is Steve Ghikadis. Steve is a Humanist Officiant who conducts secular marriages, memorials, and many more meaningful life-affirming celebrations. He holds a Bachelor of Arts in History and a Bachelor of Education. Raised as a freethinker, Steve has been married to a Christian for over a decade. He and his wife, Cindy, believe in the importance of bridging the gap between believers and non-believers. Their two young children are being raised in an interfaith household and are free to choose their own path. His family dynamic inspired him to write Humanism from the Heart, Building Bridges Beyond Belief, a book that emphasizes the importance of working together to celebrate the diversity of worldviews. Steve serves as an ambassador for Humanist Canada, Recovering from Religion, and Sunday Assembly. In 2024, he was awarded the King Charles III Coronation Medal for significant contributions to his community in Windsor, Essex, Ontario, Canada. Welcome, Steve. I'm so glad to have you.
Yeah, thanks so much. This is amazing to be talking to you again.
You know, I teared up a little bit when I saw the photo of you with the King's Medal. That just was so dear and so precious to me. It's delightful that you were recognized for the hard work you do.
Yeah, it was awesome. I was totally in shock when I got that, and it was for the contributions that my Humanist Canada chapter in Windsor here has been able to accomplish. We have an adopted street. We help out at the homeless shelters and things like that, and it's so nice to be recognized. But it's even better to give back to the community as well. So.
Oh, yeah. And as a fellow humanist out here in BC, I just was so excited to read your book and read about some of those things that you mentioned. And what really I was so interested in learning about how you managed to navigate and enjoy a loving relationship with a believer when you are a believer. But before we go there, would you start us off by telling us a little bit about growing up and if religion played a role in your life?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And the funny thing is that it did play a part in my life, but not in the way that people would expect. So my mom kind of accidentally raised me as a free thinker. I always say accidentally because she did it without, reading the book because the book wasn't written at the time. I'm not sure if you're aware of Dale McGowan. I'm pretty sure you know Dale McGowan, but he wrote a book called Parenting Beyond Belief and then also Raising Free Thinkers, where he talks about the 9 best practices for raising free thinkers. But she didn't have that book because that was written in like 2017 or something, right? So maybe 2007, but I was born in 1986, so it was a long time ago. But yeah, so she basically enabled me to just go through life and hear different stories from different perspectives, attend different services at different religious institutions with my friends, and also sometimes she would tag along, and it was just kind of cool. I got to grow up and explore my own belief system.
Oh, that sounds incredibly refreshing and very foreign to so many of the people who will be listening and watching this podcast, thinking of what it would be like to grow up without the fear instilled by a lot of hardcore fundamentalist religious beliefs. And even sometimes when groups aren't as fundamentalist, there can still be some judgmental attitudes and things like that, which everyone can unfortunately fall victim to from time to time. Even well-meaning humanists, of course, can be judgmental. And actually, your book had me examining some of my own biases because I come from a fundamentalist background. And I think that's why it's hard for me to be like, really? He's married to a believer? Like, how can this be? How does that work?
Yeah, for sure. And that's, you'll read in the introduction there that that's pretty much the reason why I wrote this book, is because I was being approached by a lot of people who are non-believers saying, like, I could never be with anybody who believes differently than me. And it's funny because I get most of my pushback from non-believers. And, I just recently had a personal message to me saying that my book helped someone increase their faith. So I just thought, that's kind of interesting. And, it's awesome if my words are inspiring you to do a deeper dive into your own belief system and you come out the opposite of me. That's totally cool. But, and I may make it sound easy, but, there was a lot of work involved. I did go through an angry atheist phase. We were at the beginning of our relationship, religion wasn't really a big thing, but when we were starting to get more serious and get into talks of marriage and children and stuff like that, that's when kind of it came up. I was going to church with her and her family as kind of like a thing you did on a Sunday. And again, I was an apatheist growing up, like the words apathy and theism. So I didn't really care one way or another because it wasn't really a big thing to me. I just thought everybody took religion the way I did, which is just like some cool stories that people use to be inspired. And yeah, so, we came to the wedding and her parents were, amazing people and said, we're so happy she met someone who believes the exact same thing she does. And I'm like, oh, well, I don't. So how am I going to, bridge the gap here and enable myself to connect with people who believe differently than me? And at the time, I took it kind of the wrong way and I got really angry and I was more angry at myself for duping people into thinking I was something I wasn't. So I called myself like, a wolf in sheep's clothing. So I had to find ways to have cordial conversations, which is what led me to finding Anthony Magnabosco and, recovering from religion, and Dale McGowan, people who were able to, have these conversations and find ways to connect with people across the divide.
Yes. Wow. Seems never more important than right in this moment where it feels like we're in a tinderbox. I wonder if we can kind of start at the beginning as far as how do you define humanism?
Yeah, that's a really good question too, and you'll probably from the first chapter you'll see that I have to explain this quite a lot because when I go over the border to talk about humanism somewhere, like doing a presentation or something, the border guard's usually like, what are you talking about? What is this humanism thing? And I usually say it's a non-religious philosophical worldview. It's places the highest emphasis on well-being, compassion, logic, and reason, and scientific investigation. And then sometimes people are like, "Oh yeah, I want to hear more about that. That sounds really cool." And some people are like, "Yeah, okay, have fun with that."
Would you call yourself a secular humanist or just a humanist?
Yeah, definitely, and that's a really interesting thing. So I feel, and other people may think differently, but I always feel that humanism, the principles of humanism, can be shared by anybody. So you can be a Christian humanist, you can be a Muslim humanist. Your beliefs don't matter; it's how what you place your highest emphasis on. So, like my wife would consider herself to be a Christian humanist because she believes in the principles of humanism and she puts those kind of above her beliefs. But she still has a belief in the supernatural. So, but myself, I call myself a secular humanist because secular just means like lack of religion, just religion being off the table. So to me, it's like I don't have a religious belief, but I, put my trust into the humanist label.
Right. And so earlier you mentioned that some of the pushback you get is from people who are not religious and they wonder how can you share your life with a believer? And I think as someone who was raised in religion in a fundamentalist Christian home, I can relate to what they're saying because I look at the reason piece, the logic piece. And then I get into this, well, is it magical thinking or is it critical thinking? But then that's putting division in right there. Like that's a judgment piece right there. But how do you deal with that piece?
For sure, and that's a fair call on that. And I understand where people are coming from when they say things like that. I try and take it as an emotional piece. right? There's a lot of times where religion and beliefs are tied to emotions and tied to, feelings, and that can also give people reason, and that can give people meaning as well. So I always try to, have a cordial conversation and find out where they're coming from so that I can fully understand what they're actually explaining to me. Because I've actually been in conversations where people say, like, I believe that God is watching over me. And then I'll say, okay, well, tell me about this God. Like, what are the characteristics of this God? And sometimes they'll say, it's peace, it's happiness, and I'm thinking they're just describing emotions. So I'm like, okay, well, this God is your emotions, and that's fine. If you want to call it God, that's okay. And then you have a better understanding of where it is they're actually coming from. And then what I always say too is that people like my wife and I, we agree on like 99% of everything. We just disagree on the small things, like where the universe came from, because really nobody knows, and we may never know. So there's no point in arguing over it.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So that makes me think about, you mentioned Anthony Magnabosco a minute ago, and he is behind street epistemology. I think, is it an approach that he developed? It's the Socratic, questioning, but he has kind of purposed it around these difficult conversations. I would love to hear more about that, because on Canada Day, I'll be sitting in our Masha's booth. So it's Kelowna Atheist Skeptics and Humanist Association. And this year we'll be focusing on humanism in that booth. But we have had other times where it's been atheism, and people have a lot of feelings. So I'd love to know more about Anthony's street epistemology.
Yeah, for sure. So it actually originated by an author by the name of Dr. Peter Boghossian. And he wrote a book that he wanted to be called "How to Have Impossible Conversations," but the label, or the publisher, the publisher made him change the title to "A Manual for Creating Atheists," which he didn't like the title because he didn't want it to be like an approach that's just for influencing people to become non-believers. Right. But Anthony Magnabosco read the book and was like, I wonder if I can actually practice this method in public eye and see if I can elicit, like a cordial conversation from this. So he started recording himself in like public places, like parks and stuff, and he'd have a table set up. He would have like a board, like a whiteboard that he could write on. And usually he would get someone's name. He'd break the ice, by having like just some chit chat, like a fair weather chit chat, I guess, is at the beginning to build that rapport. And then after he would do that, he would just say, I'm here talking about people's personal beliefs. And, is there a personal belief that you have that you'd want to discuss? And he said, it doesn't have to be, anything big. It could be like a God. It could be like your opinion on politics or something. And usually people would just say, oh yeah, I believe in God. And he goes, okay, well, can we talk about that? And then what he would do is he would just ask them questions. And it's just a gentle way of asking people their personal opinions or beliefs. And the cool part is that a lot of times people will answer these questions and they'll have to think about it because they've never really been asked these questions before. It's usually people saying like, why do you believe in myths? And things like that, where you're challenging someone's beliefs. And usually when you do that, I'm not sure if you've read The God Virus by Dr. Del Rey, but he talks about how, if you're addressing the virus, you're telling someone that you're challenging their belief system. It's a part of them, so they're going to defend it.
Oh yeah,
right to the death. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you don't want to cause that backfire effect, so if you ask them gentle questions and you actually show genuine curiosity and interest, which I'm genuinely interested and curious about why people believe the things they do, then it's a really friendly back and forth conversation. And if it starts to get to the point where it's heated or whatever, you can just say, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate all of the information you share with me today. I've learned so much from you, and I hope that you've done the same. And that's just kind of like an example of a street epistemology conversation that you could have.
And have you done any of those with strangers?
Yeah, I have. I would say pretty much on, I wouldn't say a daily basis, but maybe like a weekly basis. There's a lot of people that have some beliefs that maybe are, like I said, nothing to do with religion, but just other beliefs that I'm like, oh, well, why do you think that? Like, what is it? Where did you hear this? Why did you start believing this in the first place? And then usually we can get down to the nitty gritty of like why it is that they think that. And I go, oh, okay, well, that's funny because I've heard the opposite. And then I'll say, and then this. And I said, but that's okay if you have a different opinion than me. And a lot of people, when you say that, they're like, what do you mean it's okay if we have a different opinion? Because it's kind of one of those things that in society, it's almost like we've kind of forgotten about how we can just agree to disagree. And it's always like you have to try and prove that you're right, and like all this debating online and things like that. I think the internet has really made it a toxic place to have these conversations, because people are like, this is my opinion and I'm correct and you're wrong if you think anything different.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Because as soon as the way we say things makes such a difference, because we can end up with people reacting like this, where they put their fists up to protect themselves or to lash out, or they can respond to us like this with open hands, like welcoming us, and hopefully we're doing the same. But sometimes it's so hard.
Yeah, it is. It is hard for sure. And I think what you're talking about is like the fight or flight response, right? Like people are either, if they feel threatened, they're either going to run away or they're going to challenge you. And I just try and neutralize that right from the get-go by, starting out by introduction, like a quick introduction, like, hey, I'm Steve, can we talk about this? Or just, I noticed that you're, wearing a cross. Can you tell me why you have that cross? Like, what does it represent for you? And it's just kind of ways to have fun conversations. I mean, I'm never really trying to change anyone's beliefs. I just kind of interested into why they believe it in the first place. And I mean, I'm doxastically open to things. I'm not ever closed-minded to the point where I'm like, maybe I'm thinking maybe someone has an answer that I don't have, or maybe someone has a piece of the puzzle that I'm missing or something. But
Right.
I'm pretty confident in my own skin and my own beliefs, so I don't really have any problem asking people about their opinions and beliefs.
Yeah, I find, especially over the last year. So I have been raised in a Christian home that believed the Bible was the literal word of God, all this sort of thing, speaking in tongues, all this. It was very real in my home, and it was real to me. And that was for most of my life until I was about 40, that I started questioning. And then it's just been really within the last year or two that I've been, I think, leaning more into the humanist side of things. So you mentioned being having an angry atheist phase. I think anger is appropriate for a lot of things in the world that we see, but it is very tiring. Anger is good when it's productive, if it can
Yeah.
make us produce meaningful change. But just to be kind of stuck in the grind is a hard place to be. And I really love the idea of not just losing or leaving faith, but replacing it with something meaningful, because all my meaning and purpose came from my belief system, from what I believed. So there was existential crisis, terrible angst when I left. What purpose do I have now? Where am I going to find meaning from? And so then leaning into humanism and wanting just to make the world a better place, really promoting equality, dignity, compassion, empathy. These sorts of things resonate so beautifully with me. And you can see I have my 10 humanist commitments up behind me, because I love those so much more than the 10 commandments. Did you feel like it was kind of a journey for you, moving from one phase into another?
Yeah, and that's why I talk about in the book that it was kind of a circular thing, because I guess I started off as like a secular humanist without really knowing it. I cared about people. I cared about, I'm very an emotional person, an empathetic person. So I did, start my life that way. And then, thought maybe there is something out there, and I went through weird phases, like even thinking that the Greek gods were real. I asked Zeus to hit me with lightning if he was real, and lucky for everyone watching, that didn't happen. But and I went through like a phase of thinking that the ancient alien theory was maybe correct too. So it's like it's good to experiment with different thoughts and different beliefs, because then, and Dale McGowan talks about this, it's almost like you're putting every single brick in your foundation. So you're going to be standing on a really strong foundation. Because sometimes when I ask people questions, it's almost like they're on a foundation of sand, right? They don't really know why they have these beliefs. they were assigned these beliefs at birth, and they don't know why they have them. And if you don't ask them, they may never think about it, right? They might just think, okay, well, gay people shouldn't exist. Well, it's like, well, why do you think that? Well, because my belief system says this. Okay, well, why does your belief system say that, right? If you just keep asking questions, eventually they get to the point where they're like, okay, well, maybe gay people are okay, and it's one of those things where they just have to think about it themselves, because the only person that can change your mind is you.
Oh, I love that.
You can be influenced, right? There's different influences from all over the place, right? But yeah, the only person that can really change your mind is you. You can't force someone to change their mind. And I
Right.
only want someone to join me in my side if they've actually thought about it and come to their conclusions on their own, because I wouldn't want to just snap my fingers and make religion go away or anything. It's people need to come to the conclusions on their own without being forced to have those conclusions.
And so when did critical thinking become a thing for you then? Because if you were believing, maybe the ancient Greek gods are real or ancient aliens or whatever, at some point, critical thinking for you must have entered the picture.
I think critical thinking was there from the beginning. And I think I critically thought my way into it, and then I critically thought my way out of it. Because, when you're looking at things like the ancient alien, what's that show called? Ancient Aliens on the History Channel, they're presenting it as it being history, right?
Yes,
they're presenting it as being like, okay, this is an actual fact that happened. And I kind of think that same way when they present stories from the Bible. They say, well, this is actually true. There was a boat that all these animals were on, and right. And then you can critically think your way into it, because you can say, okay, well, is this a part of history? And okay, well, if this is a part of history, then it makes sense that this, and this. And you go, oh, wait a minute, it doesn't really make sense that this, and this. Okay, maybe that story is not true. Okay, and maybe this, and that started with me with the ancient aliens, because when I was watching it and they were talking about, there was this column that was made from a substance that wasn't found on Earth. And basically, when I did some research on it, I was like, okay, it's not true. The elements that are in this are actually, it's iron that's been, oxidized or whatever. So it's not something that's from outside of Earth.
Okay.
And then I was started going down the whole thinking, or the whole line of thinking, like, okay, well, if the ancient aliens spliced some genes to make us as humans from apes or whatever, where did they come from, right? How are they designed or made or whatever? And then I'm like, and then it just led me to thinking to look into things like the theory of evolution by natural selection, right? So just lots of critical thinking leads you from one spot to another. And the cool part is that you can wear many hats along the way, and you don't have to ever just settle on one hat. You can continue to keep thinking. I'm going to continue to keep thinking, because when you stop learning it, there's no reason to have a brain, right? So
right. We are allowed to change our mind, and hopefully that's what we do when new information is presented. If it's accurate, if it's credible information, hopefully we'll be willing to change our mind. I often send people to thinkingispower.com for a website. Melanie Teresa King. She's so great. I love her work on critical thinking.
And she's writing a book right now too. So that's awesome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's all the rage, writing a book. Let's see what else. Oh, so do you subscribe to naturalism? So naturalism, I have written down the belief that everything arises from natural properties and causes with no supernatural intervention. That's from your book, the glossary of terms you have in your book. Do you subscribe to naturalism?
I would say yes at this point. I do think that there's enough evidence to support that everything arose from natural means. There's quite a lot of steps in the process of abiogenesis to conclude that it's more likely than any other theory that's been presented. And that's basically what a theory is, right? It's something that science has come to a conclusion on, not a natural conclusion to say, like, this is the end of research, but basically to say, this hasn't been disproven yet. Right. So I feel like there's enough steps in the chain to show that it is, legitimate. But I mean, if anything changes that provides evidence to show that that's not true, then we are free to change our beliefs.
Yes. And so then are you also a rationalist? And that is the belief that reason and logical thought are the primary sources of knowledge and truth.
I'm going to say I think so. I can't see any other, but I do, I factor in the emotional side of things as well, right? Because a lot of times, we do hold beliefs that may not be true, but they are important to us. So I do feel like, reason and logic are a good way to not be duped into something, but at the same time, there are emotional things that are going to influence our decisions.
Wow, that is so true. All of us seem to crave certainty, security, order, and acceptance. And by acceptance, I mean community. And so sometimes even people that otherwise would seem very logical, if that acceptance piece is missing for them, if they've always been on the outskirts of society, say, never really felt accepted, they can be vulnerable. They might end up going down that conspiracy theory
Yep.
rabbit hole. It's all,
Hmm.
and that's how people often become deeply religious or become extreme, get
Yeah.
radicalized into anything, is
Yeah.
where we're vulnerable at some point. And often it's because we're in a time of transition. So it could be childhood and you don't know, you don't have critical
Right.
thinking skills, or it could be you've moved to a new city for college or university. Maybe you've started a new job, lost a spouse or a parent. All these things can
Hmm.
just get us off balance enough that then it can be easy for cults or conspiracy groups or other high demand groups to come in and kind of dupe us. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm sure you're familiar with the term love bomb, right? So
Yes.
it's like a perfect opportunity to someone come along and say, well, you know what, you're important to Jesus, or you're important to me, or you're important to Lord Xenu, right? Like there's just a
Right.
lot of people that
Right.
can come along and say, you do matter to somebody, and it's this
Mhm.
person. And I do feel like that is one of the things that leads people to getting into cults or getting into, radicalized religious groups that are going to maybe do damage.
Yes, I know. I even have concerns with groups like AA, and I'm all in favor of people getting help and finding their way out of addiction for sure to a more balanced life. But I do have concerns about the groups meeting in churches and
Yeah,
really often having a, well, you're going to swap your dependence on this to a dependence on this way of
right.
thinking or this God or whatever it is. That's tricky, and people are emotional. We just
Yep.
are.
No, it's true. Like we are apes, right? So we have that the ape brain. But going back to the AA stuff, so there are two groups that are actually secular versions of AA, and there's SOS Sobriety, and then there's Smart Recovery. And
Oh
the reason
yes,
why
smart
I
recovery.
I know about these is because recovering from religion, like I'm a volunteer for them, and that's part of our resources because we get a lot of people saying, is there an alternative? And yes, there are two alternatives that we know of, and there's other ones as well, but those are the two main ones that we deal with.
Awesome. Well, tell us a little bit about your work with recovering from religion, and how did you even find out about recovering from religion?
Yeah, so I went down the rabbit hole of YouTube when I was going through my angry phase, and discovered, the Atheist Experience, and Talk Heathen and shows like that on the atheist community of Austin. And they would always talk about recovering from religion as being an important organization that helps people with overcoming issues with disbelief and questioning of beliefs. And the cool part is with recovering from religion is that we're not there to deconvert anybody. We're there to meet you where you're at. So we do have a lot of people even that'll call and say, I still believe in God, but I want to get away from this like fundamentalist church. And then we'll recommend other things like, have you tried Oasis, or have you tried Sunday Assembly? Have you tried the Unitarian Universalists? Because they believe
Hmm.
everyone's getting into heaven, right? Regardless of what
Hmm.
your background is and beliefs. So, we do help people there as well. But yeah, so I started with them in 2020 because the pandemic happened and I had all this free time. And I'm thinking
Yeah.
like, maybe this is a good opportunity for me to actually step up and volunteer. So I started volunteering with Recovering from Religion as just a helpline agent. And I was talking to people on the phone, and there was a couple of people that I talked to. I'm like, okay, this is super important. This is like a really good organization that's actually on the front lines of combating people's depression and just self-worth, like finding self-worth and finding the meaning and purpose that we were talking about earlier. And I read a comment on your book, and someone even said that they wish that they had this when they were going through their deconversion journey, is your book. So I feel like Recovering from Religion is kind of like that too. And it's funny because Vila Bianca from those shows, they said that Recovering from Religion is like sending up a prayer, but you actually get answered.
Oh,
so I thought that was
so
a kind of cool quote from that. But yeah, so I started volunteering with them, helping out on that, and then my friend John and I took over the online community, which is basically a private community within RFR, which is closed to the public. It's only there for people who want to continue their journey of recovery behind the scenes with other people, like other like-minded people. And then we built up a library of resources, and then I ended up taking the vacant spot, which was ambassador program director. So I trained people up to be able to go and present RFR at events and things like that. So
cool.
Through RFR, I go and do tabling at BajaCon in Sarnia, Ontario. I'm going to NanoCon in Nashville this year as well. And I actually might get to meet Anthony Magnabosco for the first time in person. So that's going to be amazing.
Oh, that'd be so cool. That would be right on. I'm hoping I might get to BajaCon next year as a speaker.
Oh, that'd be so
talks
cool.
with them. I think that would just be so much fun. And I just love it that you are Canadian, but you're in this position of ambassadorship with RFR. That's really cool.
So the funny thing too is that sometimes I'll be on the helpline and I'll say, tell me about your story. And they're like, about? Like, I thought this was an American organization. And I say, well, I'm in Canada, but there's people all over the world. We even have people we have a volunteer in Moscow. So, I mean, there's people all over the place.
Wow. Yeah. I know they're in Australia now. And I think in the UK is coming up on the agenda. So
yeah. For sure.
It's exciting. Oh, and of course, let's not forget to mention Secular Therapy Project, which also is kind of an offshoot by Dr. Darrell Ray of Recovering from Religion. So if people are looking for a secular therapist and they don't know where to go, they can go to seculartherapy.org, I think.
.org,
Yeah. And then they can see, according to the location, who might be around them. Of course, I'm going to tout myself. I'm a registered professional counselor and religious trauma recovery coach. And thank you so much for mentioning my book, Divorcing Religion, a Memoir and Survival Handbook. So tell me a little more about writing your book. How long did it take you to write it?
So it took probably close to 2 years, but that was I was writing snippets on the platform Medium. And it actually kind of started with Recovering from Religion because we have Excommunications, which is kind of our own section of Medium where we were posting blogs. So I was writing a few stories of my own background, like a kind of a mini memoir. And people were like, oh, this is really cool. You should put it into a book. So I was thinking about it and I'm like, it sounds like a lot of work, but maybe that'd be kind of cool. So, and people in my family have been big readers and, it's always been a dream of my mom's to write a book. So I'm like, you know what, I'm going to go with it. So I posted on Facebook saying, I'm writing a book. If anyone remembers cool stories from when we were younger that they want to have included. And I had someone reach out to me that I didn't recognize the name. And she said, you're not going to recognize my name because I'm using a pen name because I'm actually an author. But it's so-and-so. And it was a girl that I had grown up with who was actually a friend of my sister's. And she said, I can edit your book for you and I'll do it for free. And I'm like, wow. Sure. I mean, I can't argue with free, right? So so she started reading it and everything. And I was putting it together, all the stories, put them together just randomly. And she said, this is no good. And I'm like, oh no, what do you mean? And I was like devastated, right? And she's like, yeah, like she's like, they're really funny stories, they're really good, they got a lot of heart in them, but they're just something's not flowing. There's no like main theme that's tying them all together. So you need to like take some time and think about it. And I'm like, oh man, like I've already put all this work into it. I don't really want to do anymore. Like maybe I just won't bother. And then I was just thinking about, what it all means to me. And I said, like, it's all from the heart. So Humanism from the heart. I'm like, okay, that's a really cool title. And And I'm like, but what am I trying to accomplish with this? And then I was thinking about, my relationship and how people always say to me, it's impossible to have conversations with people with different beliefs. And I'm like, I'm kind of trying to build bridges beyond belief. I'm like, well, there's the subtitle. Okay, I got this. And I started putting the stories. I started rejigging the stories. I even pulled them down off Medium because they're completely different than they were up there. I really changed them along a lot to fit the new theme. And when I finally handed her the finished product of the order and everything I had them in, she was like, yeah, you nailed it. Like, this is going to do a lot of good things for people, because, even for her, she's like, I've grown up so she kind of grew up non-religious, but she's also married to someone whose family is very Catholic. And she lives with in-laws. So it was like a really big thing for her to understand this and have these conversations. So she was able to have more cordial conversations. And I can't even believe the amount of people that have sent me texts and messages to just say, like, now that I've read this book, I've been able to have these conversations with people that I didn't think I would ever be able to do. And I'm just like, it's blowing me away, the response I'm getting from this. So.
Beautiful. Wow. Yeah, it's like, if we can do this thing that I'm always encouraging my clients to do, swap judgment for curiosity. And I mean, warm curiosity. Like, I really want to know what you think and why you think this way. And of course, the open-ended questions, rather than asking something that will be a yes or no answer. I wonder what happens when your wife has specific beliefs that she wants to teach the kids that are very strong for her, but you don't share the beliefs, or I think you had even put a question about it. How do you decide what compromises to make for the sake of unity during moral or philosophical disagreements? That's a question I took from your book.
Yeah, no, it's a really good question, if I do say so myself. So, and it's really important to get on the same page when it comes to family life. And what I mean by family life is, like, there should be an ultimate goal of what you're trying to accomplish, right? So if you're trying to accomplish raising thoughtful and respectful children, then you're both going to be on the same page with that. So the one thing that we decided early on was that we were going to let our kids choose what their beliefs were, right? So we're going to expose them to both. We're going to expose them to other religions as well. And I'm going to shout out my buddy Dale McGowan again, but basically he came up with the 9 best practices for raising freethinkers. And then freethinkers doesn't mean you're going to raise atheists, because the one most important thing is to remain neutral. So you got to leave them unlabeled, because you wouldn't call your child a Toronto Maple Leafs child, or you wouldn't call them a Detroit Red Wings child, or that type of thing. So why would you call them a Christian child or an atheist child or a Muslim child, right? Just leave them unlabeled. The labels are unnecessary. And if the child has a label, they're going to feel like, okay, now I have to live up to this thing that's been placed on me that I don't even know what it is. So that's one of the nine best practices. Another one is religious literacy. So the more they know about religion, the more they can understand it from a naturalist or a natural perspective, right? They're gonna see, okay, these are stories that other people tell from different perspectives. There's Islam that teaches a certain thing, and Christianity, like the many branches of Christianity, and just they're all stories, and they all have maybe some meaning that they can pull from them, but not necessarily that they're all true. And then also one of the other things too is normalizing belief and non-belief. So, you can tell your kids, I don't believe in God, but mom does. So if you wanted to ask her about it, and see what she thinks, and then, then you come back to me and then ask me why I don't believe in God and that type of thing, right? So it's normal for them to have 2 parents that are opposite. Not even that it's opposite, but just different belief systems. And other ones that are like encouraging empathy. So if you're encouraging empathy by showing someone, saying like, oh, look at that little girl's face over there. What do you think she's feeling right now? How do you think you could make her feel better? Right? Like those type of things, encourage them to go and actually make those connections. Like, I don't know if you remember the story from my book about the blind man, which always makes me cry. So I probably shouldn't talk about it.
I cried when I read it. Yeah.
Right. So it's like encouraging them to go and have these conversations with people, because that's where the magic actually is, right? Is in having these connections and conversations with people. But yeah, I mean, we could talk about all the practices, but in Dale McGowan's book, Raising Freethinkers, I can direct people to that. It's such a really good resource for finding those things that you can do to share with your partner when you're thinking about how you're going to raise your children, to respect everybody and just have those empathetic views to other people with different backgrounds and beliefs.
Wow. And we really do tend to become very emotionally attached to our beliefs, and it can become our identity. So then, rather than us holding it, it's holding us, and it can start to strangle us, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that can be true for believers and non-believers. I think issues can arise in a marriage if a believing partner is convinced that the non-believing partner is going to hell and is telling
Right.
the children that. So then there's fear that's
Mm-hmm.
coming in, or even if the parents aren't doing that, but if somehow the kids feel like they have to believe one way or another to earn the affection or to maintain the affection of the parents. So really, you have to be so mindful, even of
Right.
things like tone of voice and the way
Yeah.
that we talk to people.
Yeah, and that's why we always say, we're going to love you no matter what. If your beliefs differ from ours, you can try on a million hats. You don't have to ever settle on anything. It's the world is open. But I mean, I'm making it sound easy, right? Because I maybe had an easier situation than some other people. There's going to be some people too that you're not going to be able to make it work. So like my book's not a way to like say this is a miracle. You're going to be able to make everything work. There's definitely going to be times where you're not going to be able to make it work. I have a friend who is going through a divorce right now because of a difference in beliefs, and yourself, you've been through that, so it's not always going to work, and it's I think the most important thing is just to do your best, right? So Maya Angelou always said, do your best until you know better, and then when you know better, do better. And that's pretty much what I'm just trying to say is, we can all try our best. And, if someone is there in good faith, lack of a better word, you're going to try and work together to compromise and make the best decisions you can for your children and for your marriage and your relationship.
Yes, yes. So I'm wondering also, I think in the latter part of your book, you talk about a couple of times when you were actually invited to be part of an interfaith dialogue, or I don't know if it was a conference or what. We've had some trouble with that in Kelowna because humanists aren't religious. We're not considered a faith, and the atheist part of us, they definitely haven't really been interested in that. So tell me how that has worked for you, because I thought the examples you gave were actually really beautiful.
For sure, and I think that's actually a shame that they are feeling that way, because I feel like that's a big loss for them to not have that perspective on their council or their conventions or whatever it is that they're having. So the ones that I've done are they call them symposiums, but it's basically like, a panel of people getting up and talking about a certain subject. And the first time I did it, it was at the University of Windsor, and I was invited by the Ahmadiyya Muslim Students Association. And I don't know how they found out about me, but somehow, maybe it was like a radio appearance or something, but they reached out to me directly and said, can you come and talk about the title was God, Fact versus Fiction. And they're like, can you talk about it from an atheist perspective? And I'm like, I can, but can I also do it from a humanist perspective? Because atheism is just a lack of belief in God. It's just like, it's an answer to one question. Do you believe in a God? And if your answer is no, or your answer is, I don't know, it's still considered, atheist. You don't have a belief in a deity. So I said, can I talk about humanism? Because I want to talk about something I do believe rather than what I don't believe. And they said, sure, we can do atheist/humanist or whatever you want to do. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds great. So I got up there and I talked about it from my perspective. And I said, I'm only going to touch on the subject because it's the title of it. But basically, to me, I don't really care if you believe in one God or 10 gods or no gods at all. We all have to work together with, within reality that we all experience here and now. right? So that was the first one, and then I kept getting invited back. So I guess I'm the token humanist for this group now.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So you definitely think there's benefit to participating in a symposium with believers, with people who do believe in gods or have other belief systems.
Yeah, and I think that part of that is that the ones that do show up to do the talks are usually on the progressive side. So they're usually the ones that are open to hearing other people's opinions and beliefs. And I've met some amazing people. I've met some amazing people. One of them is not here with us anymore because of a tragic accident, but some other people. I ended up just doing a radio appearance on the Dan McDonald show again with in an interfaith setting, which was really cool. I had Dr. John Capucci, who is the head of the Catholic, I'm not sure what they call it,
Okay.
Catholic, it's Assumption University. He's like the dean of like Catholicism. I don't know, something like that. Anyway, amazing person. And then I also had a Jewish representative. Her name is Miriam, and they were both just amazing people. And we just were able to show everybody on the radio that we had so many more similarities than we had differences. And I think that's one of the biggest things is like the audience gets to see how similar we really are, as opposed to thinking like, I must have horns growing out of my head because I don't believe in a certain deity.
Right. And so I guess that leads into another question about how do we foster a sense of shared humanity in our increasingly ideologically polarized world?
Mm-hmm. And that's a really important question. And it might be a question that we don't have the answer to right now. And I think that's one of the reasons why I included it in the book, because it's going to take all of us. It's going to take everybody working together, regardless of what we believe. We need to work on our shared compassion, shared empathy. We need to find ways to build the bridges that we haven't been able to do so far.
Right. And then accepting the reality, it's unlikely that people who are in an extremist camp, they are not going to be the ones that are willing to lean into the middle. So, just be honest with yourself about that. So the people that we are reaching for are people who are more possibly towards the middle anyway, or that they're not so extreme. And I know that I hear Dr. Steve Hassan say it all the time on his podcast about don't call names, don't say things that are going to get people to put up their dukes. We want to be, like you were saying, warmly curious and engaging, and it's okay if we don't have the same beliefs. We can still be kind. We can still be respectful and be polite. So I feel like sometimes we do need to take a stand, but even how we take that stand can make all the difference.
Yeah, for sure. And, we did talk about this briefly at the beginning too. Like I've had so many people who are atheists, like approach me in a negative way. Like it's not just people that are believers that are unwilling to make these changes and try and find a way to work together. Like I find a lot of people push back on me from my own side of the religious divide because, they're staunch in their stance. And it's like, it's really hard to open people's eyes on all aspects if they're unwilling to budge. So I do go for, people who are more like-minded. Like-hearted. So that's a quote by Dr. J. Exodus Hooper. He says, I'd rather talk to people who are like-hearted instead of like-minded.
Okay, and that actually brings me to kind of my final questionings. You, I think, are you're a chaplain, a humanist chaplain. Is that right?
I'm an officiant.
So you're an officiant, and that is different than a chaplain.
Yeah, so chaplains are able to do like chaplaincy, like go and actually like talk to people who are in dire straits and stuff like that. Right. I'm just there to be like an officiant, so I can do secular marriages and funerals and memorable moments in their lives. people's
Wow.
lives.
And see, this is something we can't even do in British Columbia. British
Yeah,
Columbians are
yeah,
not allowed, humanists are not even considered as being officiants because we don't believe in a God or have a religious affiliation. So hopefully working with BC humanists, that's something
yeah. I
we
was gonna
can
say,
change because
I
it's
think,
what's good over there should be good over here.
yeah, and I think so. Humanist Canada and BC Humanists are working together to try and open that up, because I think the next one on the chopping block is going to be New Brunswick. I think they're going to be open to it soon, hopefully, because the first humanist chaplain within the military, um, Marie Claire Cadiz, she's really working. She's an advocate to try and get that happening in New Brunswick, and then hopefully all the other provinces and territories will follow suit.
Have you, or would you consider humanist chaplaincy? Is that something that can happen in Ontario? Can humanists become chaplains there?
Yes, and I've actually thought about it quite a lot, and I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to do this, because I need to have a master's degree. So I'm thinking about eventually, and I'm not sure if I can do this with young kids, but taking my master's of social work, because that would probably be sufficient to fulfill the role of chaplain. And then, so once you have your master's degree, you have to be sponsored by somebody. So you could do it at a hospital, you could do it at an old age home, you could do it at a university. So as long as someone takes you on, then Humanist Canada will put you through the program to become a chaplain. And then at that point, you can go around and actually provide services to people. And I think that is an ultimate goal for myself. I just don't know when it's going to happen, but I know it will happen in the future.
Oh, wow. It's been such a delight talking with you. I feel like you and I definitely share our hearts. And that's really nice. Thank you so much for joining me. How can people find you?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This has been an amazing opportunity, an amazing chat, and you're such an amazing person. I've been following you for
Oh.
years, so this has been great. We got to talk a couple of years ago, and it's just been nice to catch up again. But people can find me on Facebook. That's pretty much where I'm at most of the time. Facebook, just my name, Steve Ghikadis. If anyone can find a way to even spell that or say it, and I'm on Instagram as well, but not as much. I'm trying to get onto TikTok and YouTube and stuff like that, but I'm a millennial, so I'm a little bit behind the times on that. And you can find my book on Amazon. Pretty
Give us
soon
the
it's going
name
to be
again. The name of your book.
Humanism from the Heart: Building Bridges Beyond Belief. It's going to be available other places eventually as well. And I just actually got approval for the audiobook to come out on June 21st, which is going to be International Humanist Day. So I'm pretty excited about that. So
that's perfect. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining me, Steve. It was a real pleasure, and I hope our paths will cross again soon.
Definitely a Baja-Con.
That would be awesome. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I hope you've enjoyed this conversation as much as I have. Please take care, and we'll see you again soon.